Hey everyone, and welcome back. Are you ready for a deep dive into the world of AI and warfare?
I am.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're going to be taking a look at the excerpts that you sent in from the Are Robots Going to Replace Soldiers? AI and Warfare podcast. And honestly, this stuff is seriously cutting edge and a little bit sci-fi. But the reality is that AI is already shaping the battlefield in some pretty remarkable ways, and it's not as far off in the future as we might think.
Yeah, it's fascinating when people think about AI and warfare. A lot of times they think about some distant future. But, as your source material highlights, the evolution's actually been happening for decades. We can trace it back to early examples like guided missiles in World War II,
Oh, yeah.
which relied on basic forms of automation.
I mean, it's wild to think about those early systems as being precursors to like the AI-powered weapons that we see today.
Right.
And
Right.
And the podcast also points out that the Cold War was a turning point with the introduction of unmanned reconnaissance drones. Now, those were pretty rudimentary compared to modern drones, I imagine. But they really paved the way for the sophisticated autonomous systems being developed now.
Absolutely. Those early drones really laid the groundwork. And now we're seeing AI being integrated into practically every aspect of warfare. I mean, everything from surveillance and cybersecurity to logistics and even battle decision-making. Take the DARPA Alpha Dogfight Challenge, for instance.
Okay, so this is the one that really caught my eye. This is where they had an AI pilot going up against a seasoned human pilot in a simulated dogfight. I mean, this is like something straight out of Top Gun or something.
Right. And the AI actually won, defeating the human pilot in 5 straight simulated engagements.
Wow.
What's really interesting is how the AI was trained. They used a technique called reinforcement learning, where the AI essentially learns by trial and error, playing against itself millions of times, refining its strategies with each iteration.
So it's like playing a video game on hyperspeed, constantly learning and adapting until it just becomes like unbeatable.
Exactly. The AI was fed massive amounts of data on aerial combat tactics and maneuvers, and through reinforcement learning, it was able to develop its own strategies and techniques that even surprised the human pilots.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly this technology is advancing. I mean, it also raises some pretty big questions, like if an AI can outmaneuver a human pilot in a simulation, what does that mean for the future of air combat?
Yeah.
Like, could we see a day when human fighter pilots are replaced by these AI-controlled drones?
That's a question that a lot of military strategists are grappling with. There are certainly some who believe that AI will eventually make human pilots obsolete. After all, machines don't get tired, they don't experience fear or stress, and they can react much faster than humans in those really high-pressure situations.
But then on the other hand, like you were saying, there are those who argue that human intuition and judgment will always be essential in the complex and unpredictable realm of warfare.
Exactly. They argue that AI might excel in a controlled environment like a simulation, but the real world of combat is full of variables that AI might not be able to handle as effectively. Things like unexpected enemy tactics, rapidly changing weather conditions, or the need to make those really split-second decisions based on incomplete information.
And of course, there's the whole ethical dimension to consider. Like, should we really be handing over life and death decisions to machines, even in the air?
Right.
That's a tough question with no easy answers.
You're right about that. The ethical implications of using AI in warfare are really profound and deserve really, really careful consideration. But even setting aside those concerns for a moment, it's clear that AI is already having a transformative impact on the battlefield. And the examples we've discussed so far, the Alpha Dogfight Challenge and those early unmanned drones, those are just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, so if those are just the beginning, what other examples of AI-powered military tech are out there? The podcast you shared mentioned a few that really stood out to me.
One that stands out is Russia's Uran 9. It's an unmanned ground combat vehicle specifically designed for urban warfare. So we're talking about a robotic tank, essentially equipped with a 30-millimeter autocannon, a 7.62-millimeter machine gun, and even anti-tank missiles.
Whoa! That's some serious firepower. And it operates completely autonomously, like there's no human driver or operator.
That's right. It's designed to be deployed in urban environments where street fighting can be incredibly dangerous for human soldiers. Proponents argue that using unmanned ground vehicles like the Uran 9 could help to reduce casualties by keeping soldiers out of harm's way.
I see the logic in that, but it's also a bit unsettling. Like the idea of robots engaging in combat on city streets feels very dystopian future.
It definitely raises questions about the changing face of warfare. What does it mean for the human cost of conflict when machines are the ones doing the fighting? And how will these advancements affect the psychology of war?
Yeah, those are heavy questions. But before we spiral down that rabbit hole, let's explore some of the other cutting-edge AI tech that the podcast highlighted. You mentioned being intrigued by the concept of swarm drones,
Right.
and that technology is rapidly evolving as well. The podcast mentioned China, in particular, has been heavily investing in the development of these AI-powered drones, which can operate in large coordinated swarms.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, the idea of a swarm of AI-controlled drones is both fascinating and kind of terrifying. Like, how exactly do they work? And what makes them so potentially game-changing in warfare?
Imagine hundreds, even thousands of these small, agile drones, all communicating with each other and acting in unison. They can blanket an area, making them incredibly difficult to defend against. And because they're relatively inexpensive to produce, they can overwhelm enemy defenses with sheer numbers.
So it's like a hive mind, but for robots. It's kind of like what we see in nature with ants or bees, where the collective intelligence of the swarm allows them to achieve things that individual insects couldn't do on their own.
That's a great analogy. And just like in nature, the power of the swarm lies in its decentralized nature. Even if some drones are taken out, the swarm can adapt and continue its mission. It's a really potent force multiplier, and it has the potential to significantly disrupt traditional military tactics.
This is seriously blowing my mind. We've got AI fighter jets beating human pilots, robotic tanks rolling through cities, and now swarms of drones that operate like a hive mind. What other crazy advancements are out there?
Well, the podcast also touched on AI-driven naval vessels, which are being developed by countries like the UK and Australia. These are essentially autonomous ships. They're capable of patrolling coastlines, conducting surveillance, and even engaging in combat without a single human sailor on board.
Robot ships sailing the high seas. What could possibly go wrong? But seriously, what are the potential advantages of using unmanned ships like these?
Well, proponents argue that they offer several key benefits. First, they can operate in hazardous environments, like areas with high levels of radiation or chemical contamination, without risking human lives. Second, they can remain at sea for extended periods without needing to return to port for crew changes or resupply. And third, they can potentially react faster and more efficiently than human-crewed ships in combat situations.
I could see how those factors would be appealing from a military perspective. But I have to admit, I still have some reservations about the idea of fully autonomous warships just sailing around.
I understand your concerns, and it's important to acknowledge that the development and deployment of AI-powered military technologies like these raise a whole host of ethical and practical questions that we as a society need to really grapple with.
It definitely feels like we're entering uncharted territory here. The potential benefits are pretty clear, but the risks are significant as well. I mean, it's a lot to process.
You're right about that. And we've only just scratched the surface of this complex topic. We've talked about some of the cutting-edge AI tech that's being developed, but we haven't even touched on the broader implications of these advancements. What does the increasing use of AI in warfare mean for the future of international relations? How will it affect the balance of power between nations? And perhaps most importantly, what are the ethical and moral implications of handing over the reins of war to machines?
Yeah, those are some huge questions, and I'm definitely eager to explore them further. But before we dive into those larger issues, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on something that's been on my mind throughout this conversation.
Yeah.
Can AI truly replace human soldiers entirely?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that we'll need to delve into more deeply because while AI is undoubtedly changing the face of warfare, the question of whether it can fully replace human soldiers is complex and nuanced.
Okay, then let's unpack that because I think that's where the real heart of this discussion lies. What are the current limitations of AI in warfare? And could those limitations eventually be overcome? Stay tuned because we're about to explore those questions in detail right after the break.
And so, it's interesting to think about all these examples of AI in warfare. It's almost like we're watching a science fiction movie unfold in real time with drones and autonomous vehicles and these incredible advancements in AI technology.
It really is a remarkable period of innovation, but as we delve deeper into whether AI could actually replace human soldiers entirely, I think it's important to acknowledge the current limitations of this technology.
Yeah, let's break that down. What are some of the key challenges that AI faces when it comes to, replicating or even surpassing the capabilities of human soldiers on the battlefield? Well, one of the biggest hurdles is the unpredictable nature of warfare itself. Battlefields are dynamic and chaotic environments. things rarely go according to plan. Human soldiers have the ability to adapt, improvise, and make decisions based on instinct and experience when faced with unexpected situations. AI, at least in its current form, struggles with that level of flexibility.
So you're saying that while AI might be great at following pre-programmed instructions or executing specific tasks, it's not as adept at dealing with the unexpected twists and turns that inevitably arise, like in the fog of war.
Exactly. AI systems are typically trained on these massive data sets, and they excel at recognizing patterns and making predictions based on that data. But when they encounter something that falls outside of their training data, they can struggle to adapt.
That makes sense. It's kind of like when you encounter a situation that you haven't been specifically trained for. You have to rely on your broader knowledge, your intuition, and your ability to think creatively to come up with a solution. AI hasn't quite mastered that level of problem solving yet.
Right, and that leads us to another key limitation: strategic thinking and decision-making. Human commanders rely on a combination of factors: intelligence reports, battlefield assessments, their understanding of the enemy's capabilities and intentions, and even their gut instincts to make strategic decisions. AI, for all its computational power, can't fully replicate that complex interplay of factors.
Yeah, it's like chess, right? Like a computer can calculate millions of possible moves, but it's the human player who ultimately decides on the best strategy, taking into account factors like the opponent's playing style and the overall flow of the game.
That's a great analogy, and in warfare, the stakes are obviously much higher than in a game of chess. The decisions made by commanders can have life or death consequences. So the question is, are we ready to entrust those decisions to AI systems that may not fully grasp the nuances of the situation or the potential human cost of their actions?
It brings us back to the ethical considerations we touched on earlier. I mean, it's one thing to use AI to support human decision-making, but it's another thing entirely to hand over complete control to an algorithm.
Absolutely, and the ethical concerns go even deeper than just who makes the final decision. There's also the question of accountability. Like, if an AI-controlled weapon system makes a mistake, who's responsible? Is it the programmer who designed the algorithm, the military commander who deployed the system? Or does the blame fall on the AI itself, even though it's not a sentient being?
Those are tough questions, with no easy answers. And they highlight the importance of having clear ethical guidelines and legal frameworks in place before we move too far down the path of autonomous warfare. But even if we set aside those ethical concerns for a moment, there's another major limitation that AI faces when it comes to replacing human soldiers: the human factor itself.
That's a crucial point. Warfare isn't just about technology and strategy. It's also about psychology, morale, and the complex dynamics of human interaction. Human soldiers fight not just for their country or their cause, but also for their comrades, their families, and their own sense of duty and honor. Can an AI ever truly understand or replicate those motivations?
That's a good question. I mean, it seems like there are certain aspects of human nature, like courage, compassion, and the willingness to sacrifice that AI might never be able to fully grasp or emulate.
Exactly, and those intangible qualities can play a really decisive role in the outcome of battles and wars.
So we've talked about some of the key limitations of AI in warfare. Its struggles with unpredictability, strategic thinking, ethical decision-making, and the human factor. It seems like there's still a long way to go before AI can truly replace human soldiers entirely.
I agree. While AI is undoubtedly a powerful tool with the potential to revolutionize warfare, it's not a magic bullet. There are certain things that humans, at least for now, do better than machines.
But what about the future? Is it possible that AI could eventually overcome these limitations? Could we see a day when robots march into battle making decisions and taking actions without any human intervention? I have to admit, the idea is both fascinating and a little bit terrifying.
It's a question that has captivated the imaginations of science fiction writers for decades, and while it's impossible to predict the future with certainty, I think it's worth exploring what the future of AI and warfare might look like.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's step into the realm of speculation for a moment.
Yeah.
What are some of the potential ways that AI could further transform the battlefield in the years to come?
Well, for starters, we can expect to see even more sophisticated autonomous weapons systems. Imagine drones that can operate independently for days or even weeks at a time, carrying out reconnaissance missions, identifying targets, and even launching attacks without any human intervention.
That sounds pretty intense. It's almost like we're talking about a whole new generation of robotic warriors. What else?
Well, we could also see the rise of AI-powered cyber warfare, where algorithms are used to launch sophisticated attacks on enemy infrastructure, cripple their communication systems, or disrupt their financial networks. I mean, the potential for disruption and chaos is enormous.
Yeah, cyber warfare is already a major concern, and it's easy to see how AI could take it to a whole new level. That's a sobering thought.
It is. And then there's the potential for AI to be used in ways that go beyond traditional combat operations. Imagine AI systems being used to analyze vast amounts of data to predict potential conflicts before they erupt, or to help negotiate peace treaties, or even to monitor ceasefires and enforce peace agreements.
That's an interesting twist. So AI could actually be used to prevent wars, not just fight them.
It's certainly a possibility, and it highlights the fact that AI is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. It all depends on the intentions of the humans who wield it.
I'm starting to realize that this conversation about AI and warfare is about much more than just robots and algorithms. It's really a conversation about human nature, our values, and our vision for the future. We're talking about the very nature of war itself and what role we want technology to play in it.
You've hit the nail on the head. As we move further into the age of AI, these questions are only going to become more urgent and more complex.
Well, this has been an incredibly thought-provoking discussion so far. We've explored the current limitations of AI in warfare, the potential for future advancements, and the ethical considerations that loom large over this entire conversation.
And we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
Exactly. So let's continue our deep dive into this fascinating and complex topic. We've laid the groundwork. Now it's time to delve deeper into the specific implications of AI in warfare. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the historical roots of AI in warfare to the mind-blowing advancements happening right now. It's clear that this technology is rapidly evolving, and it's raising a whole bunch of questions about the future of conflict.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And as we discussed earlier, one of the most pressing questions is what impact AI will have on the human cost of war. Will it make warfare less deadly by taking soldiers off of the front lines, or will it lead to even greater devastation?
It's a tough one to answer. I mean, the podcast you shared touched on both sides of that argument. On one hand, you have those who believe that AI could actually make warfare less lethal. And their argument is that by relying more on machines, we can reduce the number of human soldiers put in harm's way.
Precisely. They point to examples like unmanned drones, which allow for targeted strikes without risking the lives of pilots, or autonomous vehicles, which can be sent into dangerous areas to clear mines or engage in combat without putting human soldiers at risk.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there's the concern that AI could actually make warfare more destructive and harder to control.
That's right. Some experts worry that the development of increasingly sophisticated autonomous weapon systems could lead to an arms race, with nations vying to create ever more powerful and deadly AI-controlled weapons.
And then there's the fear that AI could make it easier for nations to engage in conflict, knowing that they can rely on machines to do the fighting, potentially lowering the threshold for war.
Exactly. It's a really complex issue with no easy answers, and it highlights the need for international cooperation and dialogue to establish clear ethical guidelines and regulations for the development and use of AI in warfare.
Yeah. I mean, we can't just bury our heads in the sand and pretend that this isn't happening. We need to be having these conversations now, while the technology is still relatively early in its development, to ensure that it's used responsibly and ethically.
I couldn't agree more. We're at a really critical juncture in history, and the decisions we make today about AI and warfare will have profound implications for generations to come.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what we as individuals can do to engage with this issue. It can feel overwhelming, like this is something that's happening far removed from our daily lives.
Yeah. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of such complex and rapidly evolving technology. But there are things we can do. First and foremost, we need to stay informed, read articles, listen to podcasts like this one, and engage in conversations about AI and warfare.
Yeah, knowledge is power.
Right.
The more we understand about this technology, the better equipped we'll be to advocate for responsible development and use. What else?
Well, we can also support organizations that are working to promote ethical AI development and to establish international regulations for the use of AI in warfare. There are groups out there advocating for things like a ban on fully autonomous weapons systems, for example.
That makes sense. I mean, supporting those organizations, even in small ways, can help amplify their voices and influence policy decisions.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of simply talking about these issues with your friends, family, and colleagues. The more we raise awareness and engage in open dialogue, the more likely we are to see meaningful action taken at the national and international levels.
So it's about individual responsibility, but also collective action. We need to be informed, engaged, and willing to speak out about our concerns.
Precisely. And remember, this is not just about technology, it's about the future of humanity. The choices we make today about AI will shape the world we live in tomorrow.
Well said. I think that's a powerful message to end on. To our listener, we hope this deep dive has provided you with a better understanding of the complex world of AI in warfare. It's a topic that deserves our attention, our critical thinking, and our active engagement.
Yeah, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep the conversation going, because the future of warfare, and indeed, the future of humanity, may very well depend on it.
Thanks for listening, everyone.